Hello, everyone. And on behalf of the Association of State Auditors, Comptrollers, and Treasurers, I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar entitled Effective Use of AI, How to Use AI to Improve Efficiency, Enhance Accuracy, and Support Decision-Making. My name is Kenny Pointer, and I'm the Executive Director of NASAC, and I'll be serving as your host for today's event. We're joined today by approximately 300 government accountants, auditors, and other interested parties from around the United States. Has your organization considered utilizing AI, but you're unsure where to begin? Today, you will learn how to effectively harness the power of artificial intelligence, or AI, for your organization. Our speakers today will dive into the results of the recent AI survey with NASAC and review real-world examples and benefits of using AI, as well as how to mitigate any risk and address potential concerns within your organization. We're very fortunate to have with us today two representatives from Deloitte. Of course, Deloitte is a very valued NASAC corporate associate. Joining us today, Joe Conti. Joe is an advisory managing director, and Angel Wang. Angel is a senior manager, and again, both with Deloitte. More information on both of our speakers is available in their bios, which are available on the webinar landing page. Now, before we get started, I need to cover a few housekeeping matters regarding our CPE process. You should have received an email from us outlining this process, but I'll summarize very quickly now. We are using a tool called Conferences.io to submit your attendance codes and to request your CPE. To do this, each participant will need to use the internet browser on your computer or your mobile device. Open a browser and navigate to nasac.cnf.io. And Angel, if you would advance one slide for me. There you go. So there's the website, nasac.cnf.io. Or alternatively, you can scan the QR code and it'll take you to the right place as well. Next, click on the screen, click on today's session. You'll then be prompted to enter your name as well as your email address. Be sure to enter the name as you wish for it to appear on your CPE certificate. Obviously, those fields are tied together. At various times throughout the webinar, we will arrive at a slide that contains a 3-digit code. And Angel, if you'll advance one more for me. And there is today's first CPE code. 312312. You're going to enter that code into the code words box. Again, you can see that on the app and you can see it on your screen now. Simply click on code words and then type in the code 312. Hit submit and that's all you have to do. This is our way, of course, of verifying your active engagement in today's webinar, which is a requirement for any CPE session conducted virtually. Today's webinar qualifies for one CPE credit, which means you will have 3 total attendance codes that you'll need to enter into the app. This complies with the rules, of course, established by the National State Boards of Accountancy. You'll need to record all 3 codes in order to receive a full credit. A CPE certificate will be emailed to you after today's session. Certificates are typically sent out within 3 to 4 weeks, if not sooner. So just give us a little time. It's a busy conference and webinar season, so give us just a little bit to get those certificates out. Now, following Angel and Joe's presentation, we will have some time for Q&A. We're going to use the app for that as well. Simply click on the social Q&A button. You can see that on the screen now. Type in your question and just hit submit. And remember, you can submit your questions at any point, anytime during the webinar. One of the nice things about this software is if you see a question you like, you can also upvote it. So the most popular questions rise right to the top, and those are the ones we'll take out first. Our speakers today are using PowerPoint, which you should see on your screen, and a copy also was provided to you in advance. If you're having any technical difficulties, give us a call, 859-276-1147, or you can email Meredith Johns of our team at M as in Mary, Johns, Johns, at nasact.org. We have a very full agenda. I just want to express my gratitude to the speakers for being with us today. And with that, as a brief background, let's turn it over to our speakers. Joe and Angel, welcome to today's webinar.
Thank you. I'm going to keep my slides advancing. All right. And I'll quickly do an overview of how we plan to spend the next hour with everyone here. So we'll get into a quick intro, and Joe, I'll turn over to you shortly for a 30-second pitch of your background. We'll go into the overview and just, broadly setting the foundations and definitions of what artificial intelligence, and more recently you might have heard about this really cool and new emerging kind of capability called generative AI that really has taken over a lot of how we interact with AI systems. Next, we'll focus on some AI financial management focused and accounting focused type of AI use cases. And then Joe will go over some insights around very, very real and active risks and limitations of AI, and kind of how to mitigate that through an effective governance framework. And then any time we have remaining, we will turn it over to you all as the audience for questions, anything that's top of mind for you. All right. Joe, do you want to give a quick intro of yourself as well?
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Joe Conti. I'm a managing director at Deloitte. As you can see here on the slide, I have over 25 years of experience in data analytics and risk management. For the last 3 years at Deloitte, I've been leading what we call our trusted and secure AI offering for our government and public services practice. So I spend a lot of my time talking to government agencies and clients about artificial intelligence use cases and AI risk, and how we govern AI models, and how we put the appropriate controls in place to mitigate and monitor emerging AI risks. So super happy to be here with you guys today.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe. And my name is Angel Wang. I've been with Deloitte for almost 10 years, but have over 15 years of experience, mostly focused on developing analytics and automation, and, more over the last couple of years, more heavily focused on all sorts of different artificial intelligence or AI models and capabilities. I work mostly with our CFO clients for things like budget optimization, financial reporting, as well as just all sorts of other kind of use cases that are focused and of high priority for our CFO personas. All right. So here's a very high level kind of graphic to hopefully orient some of the folks here, whether you know AI or not, whether you use it or not, or whether you feel like you have a good understanding or not. The adoption and scaling and expansion of AI continues to be top of mind for most organizational leaders, both in government and commercial spaces. And so, a lot of it is, I had read, a metric recently that was, something like over 70% of workers, all sorts of workers, are using AI today for personal benefit, or to maybe do their jobs a little bit more efficiently and things like that. So, whether we like it or not, whether we know it or not, right? The folks in our workforce, our clients, the folks that you're sitting next to are probably interacting with AI in different ways and capacities. Some might be things, just simple kind of retrieve and summarization of information, but others might be more complex capabilities, right? That you're looking to AI to help you do a little bit better. But again, there's so much that is still unknown. There are also a lot of inherent risks that come with the use of AI, such as data sharing and consent to your privacy, right? What you put into a chat bot or a prompt, right, is that respected within the bounds of you as an individual user, or is that going to get kind of folded in and be used as a broader kind of training data set, right, to make these AI models and chatbots better and work better and things like that. Joe will go into this a lot in a lot more detail, but AI models also have a tendency, especially we've seen a lot with generative AI models. They tend to produce a lot of inaccurate or just completely wrong and made up kind of information and outputs, but they sound really right and they sound really trustworthy. And so it becomes a challenge, right? Trying to discern what is fact versus what is a complete hallucination that an AI model has created. And then, of course, lastly, this has huge implications from a cybersecurity perspective, because there are so many ways that with the introduction of new AI models, how AI models themselves, the underlying data, the models that are being used to train them can be poisoned, can be, misled to produce negative or, just misleading results. How bad actors are also utilizing AI for their personal gain and to perpetuate fraud and scams and things like that are probably countless, and they seem to be increasing. And so, for every benefit that we are seeing, there's also a lot of risks that we're, also observing. And so, as every organization, as every individual considers, using, scaling, and widely adopting as an enterprise, all the different AI capabilities that are available to us nowadays, we definitely recommend a very strong and proactive governance approach. All right. So again, this is more of a level setting, and hopefully is helpful. But when I think we talk about artificial intelligence or the AI spectrum, it's not just, maybe some of you think of it as, robots that are out to take over the world, or some might be more around, okay, well, it's machine learning, it's neural networks, it's, deep forest, like, whatever the types of capabilities or specific models are. But for us, and I think for me, the way I think about AI is it falls on a spectrum. And, many of you, again, probably have been on, on this journey of advancing more, more AI capabilities over the last, decade or so. Starting with, right at the very bottom of this graphic is RPA. So thinking about things that are highly repetitive, highly predictable in terms of, let's say, keystrokes or mouse clicks, right? Every month, I know that I'm going to click on this folder to download this file into this location, rename it this thing, right? And then compare it against another file. And the result is always the same. The output is the same. The file formats are the same, right? So those are, I would categorize them as a bit more repetitive, maybe high volume in nature, fairly tedious, not a whole lot of complex human processing that is required. But, easy for, let's say, a bot to start taking over and streamlining a lot of that, so that the humans involved can actually start spending more time on, let's say, troubleshooting a variance that comes up, or trying to understand the root cause of a fluctuation from one quarter of a trial balance to the next, things like that. As you move more to the upper right of this graphic, you'll see a lot more of, I would call them, like, just true general AI capabilities, like computer vision, machine learning, speech recognition, image recognition. Again, probably some things that you all are touching or interacting with every single day, whether you know it or not. So things like capabilities that we have on our phone, like unlocking your phone with your face or your fingers, right? Trying to actually be a little bit more advanced with some of the AI capabilities, beyond just predictable keystrokes, right? So this is now actually a little bit more deeper and more advanced in terms of how the machine is learning and continuously kind of training and improving itself to get better at what you need it to do. Of course, there still requires a lot of human supervision and oversight to kind of manage that quality assurance and quality control perspective, to make sure that there is no kind of drift in an output, or something that's completely wrong and an incorrect result that's being generated, or that's coming through. And then I think, you know, even more to the upper right quadrant there, it's more around, you know, actually starting to get some of these AI systems to interact with us, right? With the ability to either create more in-depth and advanced insights, you know, coming up with maybe recommendations for things based on the data that we're asking it to analyze, creating something that is very highly contextual, or maybe very, you know, nuanced. For example, if there's a financial policy that is, you know, super specific and, you know, it requires a lot of that kind of subject matter advisor and expertise to kind of run through, right? We're starting to see some of those just more mature capabilities evolve and become available. And really what's interesting here is some of the generative AI capabilities that, again, we're going to touch on in a bit, is the ability to, for now, these AI systems to come back to us with net new content based on something that we ask of it. And it will come in all sorts of different modalities, as I think we're going to go through in the next several slides. And so again, I'd mentioned the stat around, you know, just the overwhelming majority of workers, you know, are already using AI in all different capacities. You know, there are some other studies that have been done around, you know, how, you know, executive leaders across all different enterprises, again, government, commercial entities, academia, how they're already seeing and expect AI to continue to proliferate across their enterprise. So again, the stats that are on the bottom are pretty all, you know, trending right towards the direction of, you know, the expectation that AI is here to stay, and AI will continue to become more and more available and accessible to all of us in all the different types of tasks that we perform. And so again, you know, across the top here are some examples of where AI we, you know, have already started to see some of the true benefits and transformative capabilities that it's bringing to several of our clients. So again, because it's able to go beyond just, you know, summary statistics or summary or descriptive analytics, it's actually able to, you know, maybe use a lot of the historical data, for example, and use it to predict something that might happen, or understand how two seemingly unrelated sets of data, right, could actually be kind of interdependent, right? And what factors into that, what drives that, and how, you know, changing one kind of input on one side of the equation could actually have ramifications across a slew of other things from an organizational or enterprise perspective. And again, just being able to do things faster and more efficiently. I know a lot of my clients within the federal government space are constantly concerned about the, you know, having to do more with the same amount of resources that are given, or, you know, worse, if you know, the kind of federal workforce, there's a large contingent that's starting to be retirement eligible, right? How to kind of maintain that domain knowledge that a lot of those folks are bringing without losing that institutional knowledge and that know-how, right? To get things done and to make all the right connection points. And so can some of that be, you know, powered and retained within some sort of AI repository, right, that can interact with and be available to different parts of the organization. So a bit about, you know, some current capabilities that we're seeing. Again, this is probably a sliver of the true, you know, ecosystem of AI type of solutions and the type of, you know, capabilities that are being created out there. But we like to think about, you know, kind of these 5 as the key tenets when we think about, you know, kind of aggregating AI solutions at a more broad level. So again, being able to accelerate and do things faster, you know, coupling AI systems with, let's say, you know, more powerful compute capabilities with underlying analytics capabilities can really speed up you know, the ability to let's say produce financial reports, financial statements, you know, trial balances, tie point analysis, things like that. You know, it's able to now personalize a lot of things for you. So for example, when you sign into Amazon, for example, right? Nowadays, I think for the most part, you know, it's not just here's, you know, some suggested items for you to buy, but it's the next level, right, of personalization where it's recommending to me what, you know, what maybe I might need or what might need to buy based on a combination of my previous purchase history, what others that, you know, have my similar shopping patterns have also purchased. And also just, you know, other ideas for like, hey, if you've bought this, right, maybe you'll also need this. And again, it's built off of a, you know, a trove of data that is seeking to link and create patterns, right? And use that to kind of personalize my experience. And of course, try and get me to buy more things. But again, that personalization perspective, we see it possibly having a lot of benefit because, for example, if I'm you know, if I'm trying to apply to a state-driven financial assistant program, right, and I'm not totally familiar with how to do it or what programs I'm eligible for, something like this that again is trained on what others have maybe done in the process or, you know, similar personas as me, right? It might be able to then suggest, hey, if you've applied for this program, have you thought about this, right? And oh, by the way, we can actually even help you maybe complete, you know, a first draft of your submission or your application form, things like that. Automation, I think again, a lot of this when we say automation is more around just, you know, the back end kind of workflow that often takes a lot of time. And, you know, right now there's a lot of manual intervention around, I need to follow up with this person who needs to follow up with this person who needs to, you know, print out a copy of this draft document, mark it up, you know, rescan it back and then send it in an email. And then somewhere, right, we need to ingest that email and then make the appropriate changes to whatever document it is. That process right now, it tends to be highly intensive and highly manual. And, you know, it does create a lot of time that, you know, and a queue, right, between when you need something and when something is done. And so I think of AI and some of its capabilities as being able to do a little bit of a better job at streamlining that. And, you know, whether it's creating kind of nudges from different systems or helping, you know, me as an analyst, if I have all these things that are on deck that I need to review or mark up or redline or analyze and reconcile, you know, actually asking an AI system to help me prioritize something, right, based on a combination of maybe, you know, who's asking for it, you know, what the timeline is, if there was one that was mentioned somewhere, right, and the level of effort that, you know, it might take of me, right? So even being able to kind of quantify how much time I might end up spending on something that could, you know, shift, right, how I plan out my days and what I want to do first versus what I want to save for later, things like that. Creating. So this is something again that is we're seeing a lot and you know, around generative AI, it's creating new content in all different forms. So I could, and you know, maybe some of you have used things like this before, but you know, for example, Microsoft, I think image generator that I think is available to anyone that uses Bing or you know their browser. You know, you could use it now to, you know, generate something from just a simple text prompt. Or we're seeing obviously things that are more advanced like videos, entire videos that are created. Of course, many of you might, you know, have heard about deep fakes, right? Which of course is a little bit on, it tends to, you know, be associated with more negative connotations, right? Because I can now spoof basically in video format, you know, a video of me, but you know, I've got Tom Cruise's face, right, overlaid on mine, and now all of a sudden I'm Tom Cruise and I'm saying things, right, that you know Tom Cruise himself did not ever say. And it's becoming a little bit harder to discern, you know, whether something was real or not, right? So that's something that we'll continue to talk through more. And then lastly, simulation. So again, you know, just being able to actually team, you know, augmented reality and virtual reality, things like that, even with some of our AI capabilities to simulate different types of capabilities, how things might run, different scenarios. You know, if you can't be there in person, right, being able to kind of simulate an environment where you can still be conducive and working with others, you know, to continue to be productive. All right. And again, I'll go over a couple of these, but you know, again, many of you probably are already working and have engaged in some capacity with some of these kind of outputs and capabilities. So summarization is a great one because, for example, I can throw in a huge, you know, general ledger, you know, document, or if I want to summarize a bunch of different policies around financial management, you know, I can, you know, put that into the data as input, and then, or the model as input data, and then have it, you know, ask questions around it to interact with that stack of data without me having to personally flip through every single, you know, page or read through every single word. It's actually really good at being able to, you know, summarize maybe key points or things like that. I don't know how many of you in the audience are have access to something like Microsoft Copilot, but that's also another, you know, really neat example of where every time now I'm on a call, I can, you know, ask Copilot to summarize, you know, the contents of that call, any actions, and you know who was assigned to those actions and things like that. So really neat ways to summarize a lot of, like, you know, volumes of data, or you know, quickly you know, quick kind of data inputs. It's still able to kind of discern a lot of that. Q&A is another one. So again, similar in theme, right? So if I put in a lot of FM policy documents or accounting policy documents, and I just want to know what is the proper way to record an AP invoice, right? I can type that in, and out comes a very summarized plain English response that actually gives me, you know, insight and direction into, okay, this is where I need to go, this is what I need to do, things like that. And then obviously some extraction capabilities. I think that's another really, really neat and impressive capability that we've started to see. So for example, I work with lease data, for example. So a lot of that comes in different forms and formats of contracts. Sometimes, you know, those contracts have written markups, and sometimes they are you know, just someone scribbled over something to update a contract, or sometimes there are appendices to that contract if, you know, a lease is being extended or renewed, or there's new terms that are introduced. Again, right, there's no universal standard for how a lease contract is done, but there's, you know, tools that can do really smart data extraction, right? So we use that for lease data to actually then use that and collect it into a standardized data repository, which we can then, right, interact with to do that data analysis, kind of sort and prioritize, okay, these leases are coming up for renewal, right? These are the terms, how do we negotiate certain things like that. Okay, I think we're pausing for a code word check or CPE check.
Yep, we sure are, Angel. Thank you very much. This is the second code for today's webinar, 636-636. And again, just enter that into the app. Actually, I think that is the third code. I don't know if we got ahead or not. Angel, can you just double check?
Yeah,
Nope.
let me go back. Hold on.
Yeah. That's okay. I think you're okay, Ed. I think it's just
Okay.
coded wrong. So go ahead and enter that code 636 into the code words, and we'll be good. We'll get the third code later at the end. And again, just a reminder on questions. Some of you are asking questions. That's great. Just use the social Q&A button for your question. Just type it in, hit submit, and we'll have it. Angel, back to you and Joe. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, so this is the exciting part for me because this is where I spend a lot of time with different CFO clients of mine that are looking to explore, pilot, and scale AI across their enterprise and really make it a successful implementation, right? Because a lot of what we see are AI kind of pilots and initial proof of concepts. But oftentimes a lot of agencies are struggling with how to go beyond pilot and POC phase into something that is true and becomes operationalized, and becomes just more valuable at an operational level. And so again, some of these are examples, again, probably not comprehensive, but hopefully at least some ideas that can be shared with you all today, around true and actual AI use cases across finance and accounting functions today. So I'll pick on a couple just because I can't go through all of this, but budget formulation and execution typically takes quite amount of time. A lot of it is combing through, obviously what was done in previous years, kind of looking at actuals of, how expenses and executed, dollars were spent. And a lot of, I would say, manual linkage and trying to create connection points between, what we said we were, what we were budgeted to do, what we said we were going to do, and what we actually got done, right? And then what we need moving forward. I think a lot of that right now is quite extensive. It probably touches multiple systems. A lot of it might be done offline in spreadsheets or just, handwritten kind of data analysis. And again, AI can't kind of be that magic button to just press it and all of a sudden all of that goes away. But I think what it can do is take bits and pieces of those manual parts of the process and make it a little bit faster. So for example, if, I am printing out a draft budget and I'm marking it up with a bunch of, red line comments, or, I'm writing context, right, to describe what we did or what we need moving forward, instead of someone then having to review that and then, do the manual data entry nowadays, or, moving forward, I can take a picture on my phone, right, or scan it back into my computer, and have that, handwritten text be lifted and shifted, right, and copied, pasted into, whatever the finalized budget file or justification file might look like. So, being able to do that by itself, right, could save someone minutes, hours, right? And in certain cases, days or weeks of time, and just doing a lot of that more tedious and manual data processing. Fluctuation analysis it's a huge one. Right now, again, we might be looking at month to month or quarterly to quarterly fluctuations, or, comparing line items from a trial balance, or, at a general ledger line item level, right? And trying to see, okay, what drove this, right? What object class drove this? What expenses did we come in? What is the nature of the fluctuation, right? And why did something spike up all of a sudden by 500% between quarters? And some of that is, a lot of it is like, going back to original invoice documents, original contract documents, scanning through old emails, trying to, pull out, let's say if this is personnel hours, doing separate data extracts of your HR systems data, right, and comparing it at the employee level, which sometimes folks are doing by, manually extracting that data and then literally reviewing that, right? So instead, again, AI can't solve and be a magic button to automate that entire process. But what it can be really good at is, again, taking bits and pieces of what I've described and, doing a better job and making something run a little bit faster or more smoother. And also, coupling that with, hopefully less, more accuracy and less error rates. So for example, building an AI capability or an, machine learning capability to actually compare personnel hours, what they did, if there's a cost accounting system, right, that tracks to what everyone's tasks and what programs they were supporting, right, being able to see all of that at a much more automated scale, just helps you get to that root cause of your fluctuation analysis much faster. And then the other thing, the last example I'll highlight is, again, for a lot of my clients at the federal government level, they spend a lot of time currently creating and writing their annual financial reports. So they're, it's part of their annual financial statement. It includes a lot of, other contextual information that also speaks to, an agency's strategic priorities, what's driving some of the financials that we're seeing in terms of assets, expenses, liabilities, all the different kind of drivers of an organization's, spend, right, and their financial posture. As well as, if they're, going through an audit, what are some of the recommendations and, findings that an auditor has, and how does that drive, kind of how that agency needs to move forward in terms of improvements and maybe new programs or capabilities that would address those audit findings. So again, it takes a lot of time right now to produce that 300-page report every year. But, a lot of it also is there's things that also don't change all that much from year to year, right? So, being able to generate a first draft of an agency financial report using, let's say, the previous 20 years of reports and training the model on that to produce at least a first level outline or a first draft, and then teaming that up with some of the underlying data analytics, where we're actually producing, the financial statements, the various statements, it could really help to accelerate that process. And then again, then the agency is spending more time focused on validating, right? And then, thinking through, okay, what are the key messages? What are the things that, we need to explain? What are the changes that we really need to focus on? Focusing more time on that rather than, just producing and formatting a report every year, which for the most part, the format doesn't, again, change all that much. I'll go through some of these examples as well quickly. Financial accounts and mapping, there's a lot around, again, the inability for an agency to continue to trace a transaction from its source all the way to the general ledger, all the way to a financial statement, right? And so right now there's a lot of issues with that. Some of it is systemic due to the lack of, data that or metadata that gets transitioned as the data itself moves from system to system to system. And whenever you're summarizing or aggregating that data, the specific details of it tend to get, lost or cut off, right? So, but instead being able to develop maybe a machine learning algorithm that can train itself based on, okay, if it's this kind of transaction, then it's most likely coming from this system, right? And just being able to, run that model to maintain some of the data integrity, could be really helpful, right? And then again, it could help a lot with just maintaining the integrity of the data. And if, and when an auditor requires that information be shared and transmitted to them, there is a way and a mechanism to share that. I'm going to skip this one. Let me see. I think this cognitive spend analysis is, I think, another, really powerful way to think about using, different types of AI models, including machine learning, to basically, scan and analyze large amounts of different data that, might be coming from different financial systems and sources, might be coming from different formats. Some of these might be PDF scans of contracts or, invoices that have gone through a fax machine. Some of them might be coming from an ERP system. Some of them might be handwritten, purchase orders. I mean, there's all sorts of different formats of financial inputs and data that we all currently see today. But, being able to, again, quickly, scan that through all the different capabilities that AI systems can offer, like computer vision, OCR, all sorts of different capabilities, just to do that data ingestion process faster. And then, of course, right, going through the data cleansing capabilities, being able to maybe classify those transactions, right, and automatically kind of tag them to different types of spending or different types of programs. And then, of course, being able to even visualize and report on that data a lot faster through maybe like automated data visualization and dashboards. All right. I think, Joe, I will turn it over to you now to go through risks and limitations of AI and what we can do about them.
Thank you so much, Angel. Let's just jump to the next slide. Perfect. Thank you. So, as Angel has just spoken about, there are many considerations and many uses for artificial intelligence in many different areas, and whether it's in data summarization or in transaction processing, there's a lot of value to be gained by utilizing AI. And we see agencies who are very interested in adopting AI processes and harnessing the power of AI. However, there are also risks that are associated with AI. Some of these risks are particular to generative AI. So if you see here on the slide, we have some specific generative AI risks, and I'll talk to these, and I'll also talk to some risks associated with machine learning models. But in particular, I think the one that we hear about the most, and the one that people seem to be the most fearful of, is the concept of hallucination. And Angel had alluded to this earlier, that generative AI models in particular have the capability to create facts that are not true, and then believe those facts in a very steadfast way. And there are ways to mitigate this risk. There was a news article that I saw, maybe it was a year ago or so, where a lawyer had used a generative AI model to produce a briefing that they then filed with the court. And it turned out that the model had hallucinated, and it had made up specific cases that did not exist, and it referenced those cases to support the case that they were actively participating in. So that lawyer, I think, was then disbarred at that point. But it is, there are very real world scenarios where you have the risk of a model giving you the wrong information, and it's very difficult to determine if that information is true or not. Now, in that case of hallucination, there are ways to mitigate that risk. There are ways to narrow your use case. There are ways to ground your model to ensure that it only responds to questions that are relevant to the design envelope of that model. Another aspect of this is the cost related to it. Generally speaking, large language models are very costly to train. They are costly to operate. I will say that there is emerging thinking that a decision should be made in pre-processing as to whether you should call the model or not. So a risk that's not specifically laid out here, but that we talk about often, is around the non-deterministic nature of a Gen AI model. And what that means is that you can ask a Gen AI model the same question twice and get a different answer. which is very different than historic algorithmic models or even historic machine learning models, where the same output, the same input will give you the same output. In generative AI, there is a potential that you'll get a different output. And the way that you can limit that risk, as well as the risk of hallucination and the risks associated with cost, is to make a pre-processing decision whether you need to call the model or not. So if you're going to have a Gen AI chatbot and you're going to ask it a question, the first thing you might do is say, do I know the answer to that question before I go and ask the model? So do I have an inventory of golden source truth that I can say, I've seen this question before, I'm not going to go ask the model, which reduces my risk of hallucination, reduces my risk of or reduces my costs as well, and then I can provide that end user with the golden source answer. So there are new methods that are emerging to help to mitigate some of these risks, but this is all very new, right? I think it's maybe been about 18 months or so since ChatGPT came on the scene, and many of the agencies that we're working with are still in kind of piloting phases and just kind of considering moving into production. Next slide, please. A little bit more about some risks, and here are some specific ones as it relates to the business usage. And here maybe I'll make a little bit of a distinction between a generative AI model and a machine learning model. So the first example that we give there is the amplification of bias. In many cases, when we're talking about bias in a machine learning model, we're talking about statistical bias. And this really comes from the data that was used to train that model. So if you have a data set that has a bias in it, a statistical bias in it, meaning it's underrepresenting or overrepresenting something in that population, then that bias will show up in every decision that machine learning model makes. When we talk about bias from a generative AI perspective, we're typically thinking more about things like social bias. So when we produce an answer out of a model, does it give you a different answer if it knows that you are a male or you're a female, or does it give you a different answer if if you have a different political affiliation, or if you have a different race or gender, etc. So because of that, because of these distinctions in how it kind of portrays itself, the way that you mitigate it is also different. So in many cases, from a machine learning perspective, you're very focused on that training data and understanding the content of that training data so that you can identify the bias and mitigate the bias. From a large language model perspective, you're unable to, in most cases, get to that training data. You just know that it's in there. All of the bias is in there. And the way that you mitigate it on that end is by understanding the prompt that the user is giving and making sure that prompt wouldn't elicit a bias, and then scanning the response and trying to determine if that prompt has a bias in it before, or the response has a bias in it before you give that response back to that end user. So I think that's maybe a good example or distinction there. Let's jump to the next slide. I just want to be conscious of time because I do want to give folks some time to ask questions. So the way that we think about mitigating AI risk is through what we call our trustworthy and secure processes, which start with governance and then move to the data aspects, then to the model aspects, and then to the operation aspects. So I'll just cover these kind of quickly at a high level, but from a governance perspective, it's ensuring that you have the appropriate oversight, the appropriate accountability, and that you have an educated workforce. So are we making good decisions as we're building models and ensuring that we're not taking on too much risk or building or purchasing models that have a risk profile that's unacceptable to us? And as we build these models, is there accountability? So if a model makes a bad decision, where is the accountable party? Did they perform the appropriate testing? Is there the appropriate monitoring, et cetera? So big focus on governance. The next piece of it's on data. The data piece of it, as I mentioned around machine learning and training data, there's a huge implication on data quality and data bias. And as I said, and I'll repeat, that the distinction here is that if you use biased data to train a model, it will have that bias in every decision that it makes. So it's super important to understand the content of your data, the quality of your data, if you're going to use it to train a model. From a generative AI perspective, data is also very important, but in a different way. In many cases, from a generative AI perspective, we're using unstructured data. We're using large volumes of text. In many cases, it could be an entire SharePoint site that has all of the policies of an agency. How do you ensure that that data is of high quality? How do you ensure that it doesn't have any PII in it? How do you ensure that it doesn't have conflicting information in it? So there are a variety of different issues when it comes to data. Then we move on to the model piece of it, and from a model piece, the objective here is to ensure that the model that you're buying or the model that you're building is trustworthy, can stand up to adversarial attack, has been trained and tuned and benchmarked in the appropriate way. And then once you put that model into production, we then move into what we call ops trust. And this is now you have a model that's out in production and you're monitoring all the appropriate KRIs and KPIs, looking for things like data drift or model decay, and then having corrective action so that when a trigger or a threshold is exceeded, that you can correct these things in an efficient way. In this aspect of model trust as well, in ops trust as well, we're also very cognizant about things like data loss and data leakage, as well as ensuring that we're giving appropriate factual answers. So there are other guardrails and scanners that need to be put in place to ensure that the model continues to operate within its design envelope. Next slide, please. I'm just going to cover this one super quick. On the left-hand side, we talk about some of the use cases, and these are many of the ones that Angel already spoke about. But in the middle, we talk about some of the audit considerations, and here it's just kind of tying together the importance of having the appropriate documentation, the importance of having the appropriate governance and controls, the importance of your data accuracy and completeness, and the importance of monitoring all of these processes and the totality of your IT stack once things go into production. So with that being said, it's exactly 2:55. We have 5 minutes left, and I think we can open it up for questions. Happy to field any questions, or if there are any in the chat that we want to answer, happy to answer those.
Yeah, Joe and Angel, thank you so much. We do have a couple of questions in the chat, and I think we can get through these just in time. I will ask Meredith if you would pull up that third code for us. And Angel, I'm going to have Meredith do it because we had to revise that slide just a little bit.
Okay.
So while we're waiting on that code, let me go ahead and get the question out. And we have two. Are you aware of any auditing software that includes AI tools that is used either in the private or the public sector? Any auditing software using AI tools?
Yeah, I'll start. I mean, we've definitely heard of certain vendors that are starting to incorporate and fold in AI into kind of their workflow and the way that they're, just performing a lot of the audit reviews. I would say a lot of it also will come down to, making sure that these AI models are not inadvertently or unintentionally creating new issues or risks from an audit perspective, right? And it's not going to detriment the ability to substantiate, your audit findings and your reports, things like that. So I think I've heard of some. I honestly believe that a lot of them are still kind of working through what the right levels of controls and governance need to be before we'll start seeing that at a much more rapid scale. But certainly have been hearing of a lot of vendors exploring and folding in some of those capabilities.
Yeah, very good. Joe, anything else on that?
Yeah, I might just add to that quickly, and it's not a specific tool, but I'll tell you one of the first conversations I had a year and a half ago when ChatGPT came out was an audit use case. And the use case was, can we use generative AI to ingest all of our audit reports and then produce board level reporting identifying trends, right? I used to sit in an audit department. A lot of times the board is asking, can you tell us the emerging trends that are coming out of your audit reports? And it was a very manual process for us. And in very short order, you can ingest all of your audit reports and all of your audit findings, and then ask the generative AI model, say, identify the top 10 trends, give me examples of where they're emerging, and it does a great analysis.
Excellent. Joe, you may have just answered the second question, but let's raise it anyway. What's been the top use case you've seen for using Gen AI in audit? I mean, Joe, you just kind of touched upon one. Anything else?
Yeah, look, I think that there are a lot of really great use cases that are involved in either writing or summarizing or identifying patterns within large volumes of text. So if you need to ingest an audit file and to create a short summary of it, I think that's great and fairly low risk as well. If you need to put in some facts and then have it help you to generate a report, I think that's a great use case as well. Yeah.
Angel, anything else?
No, I mean, it's really great at, summarizing and, maybe if you're also just looking for stylistic formats or, let's say I want to put this report and make sure it is in compliance with APA, MLA standard formats, or my organizational specific guidance around formatting and, how to create the templates. Again, really great at doing some of that kind of basic legwork for you.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. Okay, I could listen for a lot longer. This topic I think we're going to hear about for some time to come. So we do have the third code up. Let's go ahead, people at the top of the hour that may have a hard stop. The third and final code today is 292-292. So enter that into the code words box, and that is the third and final code. Let's go ahead and wrap up. I know we're right at the top of the hour. Joe and Angel, thank you guys so much for being with us today. Really appreciate it. Very informative. And as I said, I know we're going to be talking about this topic for some time. Also want to thank Meredith Johns of our team here at NASAC for making today's event possible. And one last thing, we are using the conference app to gather your feedback and evaluations. Please take a few minutes and give us your thoughts about today's webinar. We really, really appreciate that in terms of planning future events. Speaking of future events, NASAC has 2 additional webinars scheduled. One is tomorrow, actually, October 10th. It's on corruption, fraud, and federal program theft in the county attorney's office. It's a case study. So if you're interested in that and haven't signed up, it's not too late. That'll be tomorrow. And then we also have one on ethics on November the 7th for those CPAs out there that need some ethics hours before the end of the year. We do have a webinar to help accommodate that. So November the 7th on ethics, information and registration available on NASAC's website, nasact.org. Our colleagues at the Local Government Auditors Association, ALGA, is having their next webinar on November the 12th, a deep dive into the global internal audit standards. If you're interested in that, you can find that information and registration at algaonline.org. All one word, algaonline.org. That's it for today. I want to thank everybody for participating. Joe and Angel, thanks one more time. Have a great afternoon, everybody.
Bye, everyone.